Imagine a realm where silence is as piercing as the icy winds. A realm where the secrets are so dark. Here in the heart of Antarctica, a young astrophysicist named Rodney Marks embarked on a quest to unveil cosmic mysteries, but ultimately met with tragedy. As the perpetual darkness of a polar night enshrouded the Edmondson Scott South Pole Station, Rodney Marks was caught in a whirlwind of unexplained symptoms. Each tick of the clock was a reminder that isolation was the biggest threat he faced. Roddy's inexplicable demise gave a new meaning to the term cold case. This trail meanders through veils of secrecy, international conflict, and concealed military bases. So if you want to find out more about this mystery, put on your parka and your snow pants and let's go down south. As a frozen wind sweeps across icy plains, it touches upon emblematic research stations. They dot the landscape. Each is a haven of human resilience and a testament to our quest for knowledge. Among these, the McMurdo Station, the U.S. Antarctic Program Hub. So you have a network between the facilities, and there's a camaraderie at McMurdo Station. When you're surviving in those conditions, you have to get along, I would think. It's got to be, being on Earth is one of the closest things I guess you could have to going to outer space. There is stringent regulations that govern Antarctica and a ton of controversies, ranging from weaponization to covert military bases, which we'll get into. So although the Antarctic Treaty came into force in 1961, it does ban military activity in Antarctica. However, historical military operations have taken place there to support scientific expeditions and bases. A lot of notable countries have gone down there also in the name of science. So there is some controversial military operations that took place, one of them being Operation High Jump by the United States between 1946 to 1947. Some people say that during this operation, they were checking for kind of leftover Nazis hiding out in different places, Antarctica being one of them. So then you have a highly secret British operation called Operation Tabarin in 1944 to 45. And there's a cloak of secrecy around these operations, around the military activities down there. And basically, it's left up to speculation by the public as to exactly what they are up to. And as the public has a really good creative imagination. So regardless of what's happening, we have cool stories about underground alien bases, climate controlling weapons, earthquake weapons, not to mention the actual really cool science they do down there with studying neutrinos and the very origin of the universe. But let's get back into the story of Rodney, because he's the main character here, and it really is a mind-boggling case. So Rodney is an Australian astrophysicist. He's born on March 13, 1968 in Geelong, Victoria, Australia. He pursues his education at the University of Melbourne and later obtained a PhD from the University of New South Wales. Rodney's career led him into the icy wilderness of the Antarctic, where he becomes an integral part of a team working on the Antarctic Submillimeter Telescope and Remote Observatory. He was engaged to a person named Sonia Wolter, who was also stationed at the station as a maintenance specialist. At this particular South Pole Station, he's actually being paid for by a U.S. government-backed agency called Raytheon in their Polar Services Division. Raytheon has its share of controversies. It's a military contractor known to be working on some kind of DARPA-level stuff. Sorry, by DARPA, I mean crazy weapons. So let's continue with Rodney. So on the morning of May 11, 2000, the relentless Antarctic cold gnawed at the landscape, and Rodney is going about his business. He walks from the observatory to the main station, a walk that he had done a million times. The pathway is well trodden amidst the area. However, as the frozen winds beat against Rodney, something began to unravel within him. It was a sinister whisper of what was to come. A subtle shift in the rhythm of his being didn't quite feel right. As Rodney treaded up that icy path, the unease became worse. He could feel a shiver running down his spine. It felt like an uninvited guest coming into his body. This was the onset of a fever. It clung to him, clawing at his vitality with every step he took towards the station. His stomach began to twist in knots. Wasting no time, Rodney heads up to the station. He seeks medical help from a doctor called Robert Thompson. It was the first of 3 desperate visits to Dr. Thompson, a seasoned medical professional. He found himself amid an unfolding medical mystery. Rodney's symptoms were escalating. His vision was becoming now a blurry spectacle, his joints screamed with pain, and his nausea turned into the vomiting of blood. The calm demeanor in Rodney's eyes was replaced with a palpable distress, agony, and terror. As the hours ticked away, the sun peering through the thick veil of the Antarctic clouds, Rodney found himself spiraling into the abyss. Despite Dr. Thompson's relentless attempts to diagnose and alleviate the suffering, Rodney's body seemed to be locked in a grim dance with death. Communication lines buzzed with urgency, satellite calls to people for help, but unfortunately, due to the remoteness, no help was immediately available. As night came, Rodney's battle against the unforeseen foe continued to get worse. On a grim morning of May 12, 2000, Rodney Marks succumbed to this unforeseen illness. His last breath filled with cold, sterile air of the medical facility, leaving behind a heavy veil of mystery that shrouded the hearts of every individual at the South Pole station. The icy wilderness had once echoed with Rodney's laughter and inquisitive musings, and now it became his final resting place. His demise left a trail of questions, and we're going to get into that. So first, before we get into the medical cause, I just want to explain a little bit about the kind of jurisdictional issues. So the Antarctic is governed by this Antarctic treaty system, and there's 54 different territories or countries that have signed into it, including places like the US, Russia, Australia, the UK, Canada. And since its inception, it hasn't really been tested too hard. There's no police station down there. The initial reactions to Mark's death, like everyone was shocked. They couldn't figure out why he died. First of all, everyone's like wondering. I couldn't imagine if it was me down there with my neurotic self, I'd be like, man, did we dig up some weird virus from the ice? And all that happened during the time, despite the shock, is like a statements issued saying that we believe he died of natural causes, and they would be trying to determine that. However, due to the remote nature of the station, it's taking a little bit. So this is the crazy part. His body actually had to remain at the station for 6 months before it could be transported to Christchurch, New Zealand for an autopsy. So the responsibility for investigating Mark's death does fall to New Zealand due to the Antarctic treaty system, the proximity and logistical capability. So New Zealand and Christchurch operates as a main hub outside of South America to ferry people back and forth to Antarctica. And then New Zealand was also one of the closest countries that possessed the medical and forensic expertise and the facilities to investigate the death. So in New Zealand, the forensic examination now is underway, and it brings to light a chilling cause behind his untimely demise: methanol poisoning. Methanol, also known as wood alcohol, is a volatile, colorless, and toxic substance used in a variety of industrial and automotive products such as antifreeze, fuel additives, and cleaning solutions. When ingested, even in small amounts, methanol can be fatal, posing severe threats to human body's central nervous system, optic nerves, and vital organs. Methanol would also be the same thing that you heard about back in the day when people were making homemade booze and the stuff that would make them go blind. That was methanol. And it's something that's typically removed through heating the alcohol. The methyl alcohol and the ethyl alcohol burn off at different temperatures. If you're distilling your own booze and that's left behind, you can be in some trouble. Another thing is that ethanol itself can be used as an antidote. There is certain drugs that can be basically kick the methanol out of your system. They should know about it. It's a poisoning that can happen because you're using antifreezes and glycols, things like that you would need down there, not only in the fuels, but just to operate or clean equipment, things like that. All the chemicals you have, like you would have to have all this training to be able to be there. So it's not something necessarily that would be completely unheard of to the people working there. So drinking methanol isn't necessarily that easy to medically diagnose. So early symptoms, so you get basically like a flu or food poisoning. So that's probably, as a doctor, the first thing you're thinking. The other thing is it could have a delayed onset of the more severe symptoms, such as the loss of vision or basically metabolic acidosis, which it's a buildup of acid in your bloodstream. If there's no reason to suspect methanol poisoning, basically it might not lead anything in your direction. So it's treatable once, if a medical profession doesn't know about it. And the other part is that there's not like really biomarkers. So you can't just go and do a lab test and be like, the other thing that can complicate methanol poisoning is that it's not usually pure methanol that you're drinking. It's either been in the alcohol, could be an antifreeze, maybe it came from some kind of accidental fuel ingestion, who knows? It seems straightforward because everybody should know about it, but it's not straightforward medically to diagnose, if that makes sense. So something happened during the autopsy that also was flagged to investigators to think that there might be more, and it was the discovery of needle marks on Rodney Marks' arms. That finding initially veered the investigation towards exploring the possibility that he had drug abuse, attempts to self-medicate in his final hours, just about anything. However, the toxology screens that came back were all negative, so there was no indication that he was abusing drugs or had some kind of medical issue or mental issue that maybe led to this. And the autopsy shows that there wasn't signs of long-term alcohol use, so he didn't have like cirrhosis or the liver kind of issues. So it definitely wasn't related to booze. Furthermore, the concentration of methanol in Mark's blood was scrutinized. The levels were significantly elevated, metabolizes in the liver to formaldehyde and then to formic acid, which can lead to, as I mentioned, the metabolic acidosis. One thing that is not clear though is how did the methanol enter his body? You'd have the confirmation that there was actually needle marks without any indications of narcotic use. So right away, they're starting to go, man, there could be something more to this story. So among the more sinister theories is the possibility that Rodney Marks was deliberately poisoned by someone else. The secrecy, the delayed investigation, jurisdictional challenges surrounding Marks' death have fueled this theory. The isolated environment in the depressive state can also mess with people in other ways, so maybe somebody got violent. Could somebody have harbored a personal or professional dispute with him that could escalate to this level? Didn't seem like it. The theory of homicide is often seen as a dark but possible scenario. Antarctica has been subject to, despite it's not supposed to be, military operations, and there's highly confidential military-backed research projects going on in Antarctica, as well as by military contractors, particularly his employer, Raytheon. So Raytheon, who does a lot of U.S. contracts, is called actually Raytheon Technologies Corporation now. It's an American multinational aerospace and defense conglomerate. That means, my friends, is they weren't fucking researching penguins. Over the decades, Raytheon has been involved in a lot of controversies and legal issues. Raytheon was heavily criticized for the production of the Joint Standoff Weapon Delivery System, basically cluster bombs, as they've been outlawed except for cases like when you just really want to use them. Raytheon is involved in missiles, it's involved in toxic waste sites, and it's also involved in environmental scientific research in Antarctica, employing Rodney Marks, like I mentioned at the start. That's down there doing aerospace, environmental research, you name it. There's a lot of speculation that on the internet that the militaries and research companies out there are more up to no good down there, and the research is more of a cover. Oh, one thing I will mention though is that it's not like carbon credit fraud is a thing as well. So Raytheon's down there doing their research, and obviously under the guise of national security and all those other things that these guys are involved in, they keep a lot of it secret. They have an obscure footprint down there and carrying out research alongside the US military and backed by potentially other governments. So in terms of his death, so you have no enemies, you have a mysterious employer that's been involved in cover-ups, and is it possible that Marks came across something that he wasn't supposed to see, and essentially he was viewed as a security threat? For the love of God, if you got a theory on this, please drop it in the comments because I am stumped. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you guys again soon.